The year was 2008. I was 6 years old. Every Saturday morning was a ritual. I woke up, dressed up in my Spider-Man costume, and danced to that song. That damn song. Spectacular Spider-Man is one of the greatest interpretations of Spider-Man. It has great action, great humor, and great animation. But most importantly, you can tell that the people working on the show tried their damnedest to provide us with the best Spider-Man TV show they could muster. And in many ways, they succeeded at that. The show goes all out. It was grandiose yet contained. It was small but felt huge. The show was canceled only after a year, and it consisted of 26 episodes. But these 26 episodes were full of
non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action.
Oh boy, yeah. Spectacular Spider-Man isn't just great or amazing or hell, even sensational. It's basically perfect, and here's why. The series hits the ground running. There's no origin story, no Uncle Ben getting capped in the first episode, no. Peter's already about a year into his Spider-Man career. He's already been friends with comic staples like Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy. He's already been at the mercy of Flash Thompson and Kong. This series isn't the origin story of Spider-Man. It's an origin story on how this boy, Peter Parker, is becoming a man. It's about evolution, about Peter's evolution. This is what the original Stan Lee comics were about Peter's evolution, his growth, his coming into his own. The first episode begins by showing us a day in the life of Spider-Man, and it immediately juxtaposes that with a day in the life of Peter Parker.
Okay, so Marco, now tell me, the new spider signal, too much? It's my first night trying it out, and I'm just not sure it screams friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Be brutal.
It isn't getting any easier, Anna. We're almost out of money.
But May, I'm sure Ben left you
Ben
with...
Parker was many wonderful things, but a financial wizard he was not. I miss him so.
Spider-Man is confident, he's sarcastic, he's free, he has no worries. While Peter, on the other hand, doesn't have those kinds of luxuries. Peter has to worry about getting pictures for the Bugle. Peter has to worry about money problems. Spider-Man doesn't. At the very start of the show, we understand who Peter is. We understand who Spider-Man is. We understand the difference between these two personas of one person. And we understand how Spider-Man impacts Peter's life in both positive and negative ways.
Nice, Pete. You blew it. Again.
It's important for an adaptation of Spider-Man to nail the duality of the character, and the Spectacular Spider-Man does that perfectly. Josh Keaton gives a terrific performance as Peter Parker in Spider-Man.
Growing up, I basically was Peter Parker. I knew a lot about Spider-Man, not just from reading the comic books, but just from living that high school period. Spider-Man and the Peter Parker persona are kind of an everyman. He's not the cool guy, but he really wants to be, and Spider-Man is the one chance that he has to not only be the cool guy and be the guy that everybody looks up to, but that does the right thing, and that can really make a difference and save lives and stop crime, and still talk some smack at the same time.
Josh gets it. Josh's vocals change ever so subtly depending on if he's playing Peter or if he's playing Spider-Man. His Peter's a bit more bumbly and reactive, while his Spider-Man is non-stop sarcasm and proactive. It's really subtle, but great stuff. The supporting cast is also fantastic. Over the course of the series, I challenge you not to fall in love with Gwen Stacy. I challenge you not to empathize with Harry Osborn. Both characters are played extraordinarily well by James Arnold Taylor and Lacey Chabert respectively. Aunt May, J. Jonah Jameson, Eddie Brock, Otto Octavius, Kurt Connors, Norman Osborn, the list goes on and on. All these characters are all well developed through the show, and all these characters impact Peter's growth. I challenge you not to feel it's damn near impossible. I'm not in love with the show for moments like these.
Oh, you don't need to wear a mask with us, Pete. We know all your secrets.
No, I'm in love with this show because of moments like these.
But a man has to honor his responsibilities. You're one of mine. Aunt May, please. Let me help.
I accept.
The character moments are where this show truly excels. Now, that's not to say the action doesn't live up to the task, because it does. The animators used the squash and stretch method, which makes the action scenes a lot more stylized. It allowed the animators to be more free with what they came up with. They weren't restricted. Science plays a huge part in this show, but not in the way most would think. Spectacular isn't like the new 2019 Spider-Man show, where every 5 seconds Spider-Man says something like,
Sphenopalatine ganglioneuralgia.
Science and education play a part in the show, don't get me wrong, but the role of science and education is subtle at best. Each episode is named after a notion in education, whether it be biology, psychology, or even criminology. This choice may seem strange at first, but in the context of the show, it's not at all. Peter is only 16 years old in the show. Each episode is smartly titled to coincide with the theme of the episode and of what the characters in each episode are going through. All of these episodes serve as lessons for Peter and the supporting cast. And the show doesn't shy away from lessons. Without getting into spoilers, Peter loses. He loses a lot, but no matter how much he loses, he always finds a way to get back up. Now, I can understand why a lot of modern day Spidey fans, maybe from the MCU fandom, wouldn't want to go out and search for half a century old comics at this point. And frankly, they don't have to. I'd highly recommend it, though, because they're awesome. But they don't have to. Just like the early Lee and Ditko comics, this show is Peter first and foremost, Spidey second. When Spidey's fighting baddies like Electro, we're not worried about if he'll win the fight. We're worried about if Peter will make it home on time so Aunt May doesn't ground him.
Not acceptable.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Static. I'll be home soon. Bye. I'm so grounded.
When Peter has to bail at the fall formal to fight the Green Goblin, we aren't worried about Spider-Man. We're worried about Peter. We're worried about if Peter will get back to the dance in time to have that final dance with Mary Jane. Speaking of Mary Jane, this MJ is pretty close to perfect. From her mannerisms to her introduction to how she talks and interacts with Peter, she cares about Peter a lot. She's got that party girl vibe that makes MJ MJ, but she's not gonna take no nonsense from anyone. Perfect. But she's not the one you're rooting for Peter to get with. No, you're rooting for Peter to get with Gwen. We're actively thinking about what's best for Peter, not for Spider-Man. Peter and his supporting cast play victim to the life and burden of Spider-Man and the villains that he has to face. Villains like the Shocker, Electro, to lesser known characters like Molten Man. The villain cast for this show is insane, with a lot of them having near perfect origin stories. And the origin stories that are changed still have the essence of what made those classic villains classic. Electro's head is still in the shape of a lightning bolt. Rhino still has a human face sticking out of his head. All these designs are fantastic and pay homage to the source material, like Spider-Man having underarm webbing. It's something that the MCU has brought back up into the mainstream, but it was nice to see it in 2008. The show gets the focus right, and the show understands what made Spider-Man unique back in the 60s, and the art style captures that beautifully. At first glance, the animation may look bad, but that's at first glance. If you show anyone in 2020 Steve Ditko's art, they'll say it looked bad. But then they'll start flipping through the pages and they'll be mesmerized. In motion, it's fantastic. It still holds up pretty well. This entire show holds up amazingly, from the acting to the cinematography. Can we talk about how they pulled scenes straight from the Raimi movies? I mean, the animators didn't have to do that, but they did, and that just goes to show that the people making this show are Spidey fans first and foremost. Perfect. But you know what's not perfect about this show? It's cancellation. Greg Weisman and Victor Cook did a great job with this show. I mean, it was praised by Spidey fans and casuals alike. Unfortunately, the show ends on a huge cliffhanger, and it's a shame that we're never gonna see what happens. Greg Weisman and Victor Cook had this to say on the Spectacular Spider-Man home releases.
We're hoping to create a Spider-Man that will be a classic. This will be a show that'll be remembered 20 years from now as the ultimate Spider-Man show.
Something that's both incredibly contemporary but incredibly iconic and classic.
And I think they succeeded at that with flying colors. But if you disagree, well,